So this morning we've got two speakers. Brendan McDonald, an assets analyst from Warrnambool City Council. Good morning, Brendan, and welcome. And David Norris, the GIS Systems Manager of Southeast Water. So good morning to you as well, David. But before we begin, we thought that we'd ask each of our speakers to share with us their perspectives on what data sharing and data exchange means to them in their roles, in their organisations. So Brendan, if I could start with you.
Thanks, George. Data sharing and data exchange, I probably hadn't considered it to be a difference until you sort of prompted me about it. But on reflection, I think we would consider data sharing to be the willingness to just give data freely, like open source or to whoever the recipient is. When I think data exchange, it's more something for something else. So I do speak a bit of this in my presentation, but whether you're giving data to another agency and they reciprocate and give their data back to you, or whether it's data for a particular purpose or a project and then you get an outcome back. So we'll generally use them interchangeably, but yeah, not until we sort of think about, is there a difference? That potentially there is one.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And do you have a specific instance where you've exchanged data, say with One on Water, and the kind of things that you have to put in place?
Yes, we've had something in place for some time now where we receive their GIS layers when it comes to water, sewer, roof water harvesting assets, and in turn we give them our drainage data. So it gives a bit more of a, each authority then gets a holistic view of integrated water management and the networks involved. And that's been in place for some time now.
Okay. And not to get too technical, but is that, do you use it, do you deliver it and receive it as a web services feed, or just something that's a download of a data set?
That task sits with our GIS officer, and she will manually do an extract and send them flat files, MIF/MID map info files.
Great. Thanks very much, Brendan. And David, what about your perspective at Southeast Water?
Yeah, thanks, George. And thanks for the question. A bit like Brendan, probably would have a couple of years ago, if you had asked me this same question, you probably would have got a similar answer. But I think for us, the data sharing side of it, particularly in these with the COVID era, is more around the collaboration and sharing. So we do a bit of that, and I mean things like SharePoint and sharing documents and sharing files and publishing data via the web. So we publish all our GIS data to the web, and it's available. You can access it and view it, but it's still owned by Southeast Water. So it's obviously freely available. You can log on to the Asset Web Map, for example, view our asset information and get at whatever information you want from there, but it's still owned by Southeast Water. When we talk about data exchange, I guess our first thing is we try to understand what the partner organisation or council, or whether they be an engineering consultant doing design work for us, we try to understand how they want to consume that data and what they want to be using it for, so that we can provide them with exactly what they need. And then we also discuss formats and how they would like to receive that information. I mean, it goes back a long time. You'd be very familiar with digital data coming in from land development industries. So this is our as constructed network data. So that'll come from land developers and consultants. And that comes to us in primarily, an AutoCAD DXF format. So that's been around since the 80s, but that's basically DXF is, data exchange format, DXF. So that's a classic exchange of data. So, and I think that's where it can change ownership. It can go from a consultant or an owner, and they hand data over to Southeast Water, and we capture that and ingest that into our system, and that becomes ours. In turn, we do exports for the land development industry, so they can continue on and do design work and connect up with our existing network and do all that edge matching type of stuff. So I think the other point is, I guess, where we are exchanging data and someone's going to use it for a purpose, we enter into a digital data license agreement with them. I mean, we have had instances where data is being shared and or exchanged, handed over to someone, and they've used the data for another purpose. So we always try to ensure that people we're working with are using it for a particular purpose, and we also set some time frames on that as well. So we might license them to use the data for 1 year, and that way they come back to us and they get a refresher and update. So I hope that kind of explains a bit.
It does. You know, I'm sure that you'll probably go into it a little bit more in your presentation, and it'll raise some questions. So I think what we'll do now is kick off with our first presentation, and that's Brendan McDonald. I'll just do a brief intro to Brendan. As I mentioned, Brendan is with Warrnambool City Council, and he's the current assets analyst, and he's delivered many system improvements and integrations, particularly in asset management and GIS. Brendan has also contributed to the implementation of the ASPEC data standards, which is now an embedded process with Warrnambool developers. He's currently working on mobile work solutions for the depot teams. So over to you, Brendan.
Thanks, George. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I'm operating 2 PCs, so I've got 2 monitors. Alrighty, so hopefully everyone can see that. As George stated, I'm Brendan McDonald from Warrnambool City Council. I've been with Council for 10 years, and over that time my role has changed, beginning part-time just mapping assets, particularly the drainage network. I'm now the asset analyst, responsible for condition audits, asset accounting, project capitalisation, recognising gifted assets and subdivisions, administration and enhancement of the asset management system, asset information requests, and industry surveys, and the like. So, a bit about Warrnambool. It's a regional hub situated on the coast, surrounded by Moyne Shire. We are 121 square kilometres with a population of 35,000. In terms of our size of operation, we have a $15 to $20 million capital works budget and receive an average of 5 million in gifted assets each year. So probably a bit smaller than some councils that you're used to dealing with. Today, I'll be presenting how we've undertaken various collaborative projects, the hurdles and tips for success, and then the importance of standardisation, particularly when it comes to data. So within WCC, when it comes to data governance, we've got key stakeholders sitting across each directorate, which makes it difficult to make it anyone's priority and responsibility. There's different needs and focuses. There's different platforms, software, and the end user contact points across council vary. The Strategic Asset Management Unit is self-sufficient when it comes to infrastructure spatial data, and our GIS officer looks after the VicMap data, property data, and corporate GIS platform and its administration. Sorry, a bit more on this one. When beginning collaborative projects, and the members haven't worked with each other before, if you get the opportunity, start small. A new project working group may not know the ins and outs of each area. Use a pilot project to understand how different end users use the products. One early example for us was attaching hyperlinks to the assets within the corporate GIS. which could either then launch the asset management system for full asset information or run a report on the report server. This involved IT and GIS learning how engineers view the data, and the assets team learning what format the software consumes. This process should occur with interagency projects as well. You can't just jump to a collaboration and expect it to work. You need to build that foundation of trust, expectations, and common goals. We achieved this through many smaller projects over time and regular knowledge sharing. These came in the form of infrastructure projects with neighbouring councils by way of resealing contracts and condition audits. This also assists with collaborative, competitive tendering. Knowledge sharing, similar to today, many software vendors have user group forums where clients present and share how they use software. Council and One and Water use many similar products and have presented regularly at these various conferences. It was these smaller interactions over time that allowed us to build our confidence and trust in each other, and is what I believe to be one of the key factors to the success of the ASPEC implementation. Brenton O'Rourke from One and Water spoke of this in more detail in the previous forum. You may remember him saying that back in 2012, a review of ASPEC was a mammoth undertaking and brought the project to a halt. Then in 2015, we both decided to pick it up again, but together. Other regional collaborative studies here include the Great South Coast Digital Strategy from 2016, which more focused on business and the community and how do people use technology in the region, with a focus on the NBN rollout. The report did identify that local governments still have a lot of orphan systems with some scope for shared services, and there were 7 GIS systems between the councils, making regional planning difficult. WCC, Corangamite Shire and Mine Shire currently all use TechOne, so we're looking at opportunities to share a platform and save costs and administration. If this is successful, we would then widen it to all IT as a shared IT strategy, encompassing systems, infrastructure, applications, staffing, policy, procedures, gap analysis, and align it with a 5-year plan, which would then align with licensing, such as our Microsoft Office, antivirus, and AutoCAD licensing. Here's a few examples of the conferences that we present at. This was before COVID, when we could actually do it in person, where we discuss how we use the software and what exciting projects we've undertaken over the last 12 months. Everyone uses it differently, so it's a great source of inspiration and knowledge sharing and display of competence to build trust in each other. This is what was occurring during those years of putting the ASPEC implementation project on hold. However, now due to COVID, much of these platforms are online via Zoom, Teams, or Yammer communities of practice today. So, similar to what George mentioned at the start of the forum today, interagency data exchanging. So to continue with our great partnership with One and Water, as I previously gave an example, we exchange their water, sewer, roof water harvesting infrastructure data with our drainage data every 6 months. There are data share agreements in place which have disclaimers and limitations of use and the like. We're also trialling a Capital Works project sharing platform with them. I'll show this in a second, to find efficiencies of joint projects and prevent rework if we happen to meet at the same site. We get power line, power cable, streetlight data from Powercore, but we generally have to request this. It's not automatic. And we've had no luck getting spatial data from Telstra or gas companies, but they do respond to dial flue digs. It should be noted that WCC doesn't give data out in ASPEC format. There is an AP acknowledgement that goes along with this, So instead, we determine what attributes are needed by consultants, usually pipe diameters and inverts if it's a flood study or design. But this might be a future discussion with George, and as a consortium grows, how we do make this data more widely available. Snapshot of our online sharing platform. So you can see Warrnambool and Wannon both have projects potentially overlapping. It allows us to put project managers in touch with each other. It's still in the trial phase, but been well received and is likely to go live in the near future. It also has the capacity to invite other authorities, so we can do similar planning if Telstra Gas Power Corps come on board. And even road rehabs proposed by Vic Roads or our neighbouring councils that may abut ours. We can start those discussions too. Okay, open source data sharing. Bit light on here. We've uploaded our waste collection zones to data.vic back in 2018 as a test, but we haven't put the time in to create governance responsibilities around this. This was made more difficult just by the sheer number of questions. So what format or type should it be? Shape, MIF, MID, geo packages. What projection? So MJ94 is our internal standard. Does that work for people looking out from Melbourne? We need to put units on each attribute and maintain a data dictionary. What about maintenance of the data set itself and the currency? Who would be the custodian and responsible for this? Particularly when the previous, the first slide showed our stakeholders internally spread across the organisation. Would these published data sets overlap with or contradict with other available data sets? And what do people find useful? I'm all for data sharing and making it available, but there needs to be an understanding of what the data represents so people don't make the wrong decision. There's also been no guidance based on our org structure. It's no one in particular's priority and no identified business need. Also note that earlier this week, Tuesday the 28th, was the International Access to Information Day. Okay, standardization, because whenever everything is the same, things run much smoother. There are many things to standardize. The ASPEC project aims to get our data, asset data in order. It also references the Australian standards for classification of subsurface utilities. However, we haven't applied this standard to the wider organisation or requested from our utility data providers. Processes can also be standardised and reporting can be standardised, but this is a tough one. So ASPEC now gives us a tool to collect the required data from developments. Previously, some would just give us a PDF plan of pipe locations. Most would contain inverts, and there would be some that wouldn't contain diameters or materials. ASPEC is a way of establishing council's requirements upfront, rather than back and forth between the consultants, development engineer, and assets team. ACDC allows clients to instantly self-validate, not relying on council officers to provide their review and review their submission, saving both parties time and resources. Okay, standardisation of processes. We now review our internally delivered capital works as we would a developer's submission of their as-constructed plans. Having the data always arrive in the same format has allowed us to automate many processes, rather than manually having to map fields each time or undertaking a manual manipulation of the data. The IDM already referenced ASPEC and ASCONs, but we had to clarify this with the industry, that by ASCONs, we mean as constructed data, not rehashed design plans or plans just stamped as ASCONs. NatSpec and AusSpec are some other standards that our projects team have said that they use. So where does this data end up going? The state and industry bodies come along and ask for all kinds of random things. There are different standards and definitions for different reporting bodies. Local government performance reporting framework only looks at sealed roads and the customer requests relating to these. It's a particular kind of customer request, so this means manually checking the correct categorisation from our customer request management system. The Victorian Grants Commission splits urban and rural roads with their own definition and by traffic counts. And they also want us to separate bridges made of timber from any other construction material. The national state of the assets includes additional asset classes and also wants us to split it by condition, function and capacity, but on a 3-point scale, being good, fair, poor, when most scales are 5-point. We had the MAB standardisation project, which began with a road register and are now looking at condition data so that we can benchmark road conditions statewide with more robustness. The ISO 55000 also has a technical spec now on guiding the alignment of asset management, finance and accounting, and will soon release one on data standardisation. Vargo, they send us surveys when looking at a particular aspect of governance. These surveys often request data that hasn't been gathered before or requires manipulation and analysis into a different metric. For example, the recent Maintaining Local Roads survey asked for road seals to be split by thick and thin asphalt, terminology not typically used by the engineers. So where does all of this fit, and how does what Warrnambool has done fit with the larger theme of the Victorian Digital Asset Strategy? Until now, VDAS wasn't even on our radar, and having only given myself a crash course in what it looks like, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm interested to learn more. We haven't fully grasped all the requirements and needs of aligning with VDAS, but we have prepared for change management. We've changed our internal thinking. We're not stuck in our ways and statements like, but that's the way we've always done it. And we've had small wins on the board for a sense of achievement and encouragement for continuous improvement. It's not just about getting data. Consideration of data needs at the start of the project, and it's not an afterthought. Stakeholder requirements, the checks and balances and workflows, and business readiness. This comes back to change management. And finally, limitations and benefits. The idea of a digital twin is an awesome concept. However, being quite a small geographic area, our maintenance teams could travel the same road twice or 4 times a day. This reduces the value in them accessing asset data to the nth degree before their trip. In addition to this, when we're talking about 3D modelling, VR and extensive component libraries for BIM, our thoughts turn to our IT resources, both in processing power, the team to implement all of this. Our current GIS only handles 2D data, and we're still unsure if our drainage register is complete. However, it would be unwise not to future-proof ourselves by capturing data now and holding on to it until such point that we have a way to easily use it or distribute it through the organisation. So thank you for listening. Do we have time for questions?
We certainly do. Thank you, Brendan. We've got a couple of questions in already. If you'd like to post your questions, you can have there's a Q&A box that's available to the bottom of your screen, or you can put it into the chat box. So both are being monitored at the moment. So we'll start off the first question to you, Brendan. You mentioned that with many different stakeholders, it's a challenge at Warrnambool to get data owned and prioritised. In your ideal world, who would own it?
Oh, good question. I think we need to make data more of a priority, and I see that being some sort of restructure. It doesn't make sense to have our asset and GIS team in different directorates and separate IT as well. I think it could be, we do have, you know, IT is information technology, should sit with them, but maybe they're responsible for the governance of the data, and the actual data itself, the content, could sit with different teams. All teams throughout council have their own data. There's property data, there's local laws data and infringements, there's the asset data. I think it's too big an undertaking to consolidate all of that into one area. I think we need to put practices in place that everyone that uses data has that responsibility. A bit like, you know, record keeping is everyone's responsibility. Customer service is everyone's responsibility. Data management should be everyone's responsibility. So I guess, yeah, there's two things there. Let's try and improve the profile of data management and put some governance rules in place, hopefully to be driven by IT. What that looks like in future with shared services and a web platform and that sort of thing could be different. But when it comes to asset data, I guess the asset team is responsible for that. Yeah, so yeah, it's everyone's responsibility, I guess.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that you've got different organizations have different data sets, and then there's corporate-wide data. You didn't mention it, but things like aerial photography and the like. So, so where you're at is in the infancy of setting up your data governance.
Yes,
around that. Okay.
So just to build on that very first example I gave around data exchanges, I've set up our drainage layers to do an export from the asset management system, and they go into a bit of a, whatever you call it, data hub that sits with corporate, so that our GIS officer has access to those, and they're the files that she would share with One & Water. So she doesn't have to go digging into the asset management system and finding out, okay, what are the criteria, what fields do I need, that sort of thing. So I've, yeah, published those for her exchange.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Next question. With your trial of project coordination system, what percentage of projects require coordination when there's a conflict?
It is very low. As a percentage, I wouldn't know, but we've had only 2 cases where the PMs have got in touch with each other. So if you think One & Water's catchment is much larger than just Warrnambool as well. So there were only 2 instances where they had a water main or sewer main, I can't quite remember what it was, going through a road that we had flagged for rehab in the coming years. They were able to reach out to that PM and say, you know, we want to replace this pipe next year. You've got it proposed for next year. Can you defer that? Also, and that's going ahead. So I think that in itself has already saved us having to retrench a freshly rehabbed road. So it's already paid for itself. But yeah, there have only been 2 cases so far. It would be great if we can get more agencies on board and find out where Telstra, especially when the NBN was getting rolled out and we've got trenches all over the place. But yeah, those works still go on. So hopefully we can sell it as a good idea to those authorities as well. Yeah,
well, that SmartWorks dashboard looks like a terrific initiative. So I hope it goes well for you. Next question, one from me. You mentioned in one of your slides that you weren't receiving data from a couple of utilities. What kind of impact to your organisation is there about that?
It puts up just more pressure on the project delivery, or the planning before project delivery, that if we're trying to do a park sort of landscape design, we have to wait until we do a dial before you dig to get the service locations. We can't just turn on a layer and go, yep, that site's all clear, or here's indicative locations of gas going through. So that means, we can't put a playground here, it has to get moved over. And what does that mean for other flow-on FETs? So it really reduces that window that the projects team have to operate in, rather than getting ahead of it, a couple of years in advance to say, okay, that site's, completely out because you've got gas on one side, electricity on the other, whatever it may be. That's probably the only impact. It's a bit of a nice to have. We've used One & Water's pit location data when there's been external customer requests come to us around a damaged pit or something, and we can look and go, no, it's not a council pit. It's not that we don't have it in our GIS, it's actually on One & Water, so it's likely a sewer pit, for example. So it'd be good to do something similar with Telstra to say, it's not a stormwater pit, it's actually a Telstra pit.
Great. Next question from the audience. What is your definition of successful data exchange?
Okay, well, since David's discussion, I've probably been rethinking what my definition of data exchange was. I think it is successful if, using David's definition, that it's the exchange of ownership, that you have the confidence in that data and you're not second guessing it, and you can use it to make reliable decisions and judgment calls. So if you've received a development submission and you are responding to legal points of discharge permit requests, that you can go, okay, this is where your property connection is, this is how large it is, this is its invert level, and give that to the ratepayer with confidence. I think that's successful data exchange. Not that, we think it's somewhere at the back of your property, go dig for yourself. And just then to have them not come back to us and say, it was on the other side of the block to what you said, makes us look a bit silly that we don't know where our data is when we've now put our name to that data. We can't go back and say, oh, sorry, it's not actually our data. We're just passing on what the developer gave us. Yeah, I think it does come down to that ownership, and you've got to take all the responsibility when you do take it on.
Yep, no, terrific point there. And another question from me, because we seem to be getting a few from the audience, which is great. If you had a magic wand, Brendan, who would you tap on the shoulder to have data exchange mandated?
Oh, that's a tough one. Yeah, I'm not quite across all of the governing bodies that we've touched on, especially with VDAS. That was sort of my first introduction to the who they are, the Victorian
Office of Projects Victoria.
Yeah, yep. Or the other example I mentioned earlier with the National Day of Open Data from the Office of Information Commission, whatever they're called. So I'm starting to learn about all these other governing bodies. So I'm not quite sure who it would be mandated through. Yeah, no idea.
Okay. Do we create a data exchange commissioner?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah, baby steps, having, before this, not knowing that there's a difference between data sharing and data exchange, we are, yeah, very new to that side of things. I mean, I thought ASPEC was a big accomplishment and getting data in a standard format, but obviously there's a much bigger world of data management out there that I haven't yet been exposed to.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, thanks very much for your presentation and your authenticity in answering the questions. It's always difficult to know if you're going to be put on the spot, Brendan, but you did really well.
I'm going to stick around and hopefully learn a bit more.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, so thanks again. Now, everybody will see that the next poll is on their screen. Have you contributed to or downloaded from data.vic.gov? And so there's two aspects to that. One is, have you contributed and have you downloaded? So just have a look at that. We'd be really keen to see what everybody's position is on that. So we'll just give that another 20 to 30 seconds to run as we prepare for our next presenter. Fran, are you able to share that particular poll on the screen, please? Okay. So I'm guessing, I'm not familiar with this polling system, but I'm guessing that that comes onto everybody's screen. All right. Okay, so so thank you everybody who's participated in that. Don't hesitate to continue participating in that particular poll. Okay, I'd now like to move on to our next speaker, David Norris of Southeast Water. As I mentioned, David is the GIS Systems Manager at Southeast Water. So with over 30 years experience in the water industry, and for the past 15 years, he's been responsible for the technical management, administration, development, strategic direction and integration of spatial related systems and data at Southeast Water. David has a background in survey and mapping and holds a Master of Information Management and Systems from Monash University. With the evolution of multi-dimensional asset models, he's been leading the development of 3D model management systems and processes within Southeast Water to support their digital engineering initiatives. David, over to you.
Thanks very much, George. I hope everyone can hear me. I will share my screen. Hopefully that's all working. If George could just give me the thumbs up that that's all good.
You bet.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction, George, and thanks also to Brendan for your insights into things down at Warrnambool. I'll be talking to you today about a specific case study, and it is related to, as George pointed out, I guess the multi-dimensional 3D modelling side of things and how that's evolving for us at Southeast Water, and how we're working with consultants and sharing our models and improving those design processes and as constructed data capture. Next slide. Oh, there we go. So first of all, I'll give you just a brief overview of Southeast Water for those of you that are not familiar with us. The specific project I'll be talking about and use as a case study for this topic was an aeration system upgrade at one of our treatment plants. I'll talk about how we were able to exchange our existing models with the consultant doing the work, and then how that's been shared during the process and how it will be coming back to us. I've got some insights, and as I said, this is an evolving area, and we've come up with some initial agreements on how things can work going forward, which we've learned from this process. So Southeast Water, so we're one of 3 retail water companies in Melbourne. located in the southeast. So we cover basically from St Kilda to Portsea and out to the east in Longwarry. So we've got a couple of coastlines there. We've got Port Phillip and Western Port as well. We provide water, sewage and recycled water. We're 3,640 square kilometres in size and have 1.87 million customers and assets to the value of 4.7 billion. So lots of assets to manage. Okay, so the project itself was to upgrade the aeration system at the Mount Martha treatment plant. So it's quite a large treatment plant in Mount Martha on the Mornington Peninsula. The aeration system was failing and needed all sorts of maintenance, so it was decided to upgrade. The group that manages these upgrades is called Resource Recovery, which is just treatment plant systems basically, and they engaged their partner company GHD to deliver a functional design. So the GHD digital engineering team, in consultation with South East Water, proposed to design the upgrade works using 3D models. So there's three key parts to it. There's the aeration manifold, the diffuser grids, and there's a heat extraction system for the blower building. So the functional design in 3D will provide the following benefits. So its improved design models provide a much better understanding of the project and risks. So it gives the detailed designers and construction contractors better information and can probably sharpen their pencils when it comes time for request for quote stage. So at RFQ, they have better information and they can get a better outcome with their proposals, and you can expect to see some cost savings in the detailed design phase and construction. Big aspect for South East Water is safety. So improving that safety during construction. So using those models to design a safe construction area, so that we keep the workers safe while they're doing the construction work, and ultimately deliver a work site which South East Water has to then operate that ensures the maintenance activities can be completed safely. So do things like clash detection and make sure there's room for people to get in and around and remove covers and access equipment and all that sort of thing, so they can do that in a safe way. So I got kicked off. So the project manager contacted myself in the GEOS team regarding what information we had, what 3D models we had, what were the data formats, what are our platforms, and how we might, I guess, exchange that information with GH&D, so they had a starting point to kick off from. So after a discussion with the PM on that project, we decided to have an initial early upfront meeting with GHD, and we met with their digital engineering team to discuss the approach and how we would exchange data and how we might share information with each other. So during that time, we discussed how we could do that, and we came up with I guess a work plan. So we agreed that we could provide our existing 3D building model and 3D surface mesh from the drone scan. So we had the building model, but we didn't have all the assets and equipment within that model. So there were some gaps. GHD proposed to use their digital laser scanners and scan the existing equipment within the building. So doing a point cloud scan, and then from that point cloud scan, they could generate the 3D models with all the equipment and update the existing model that we provided them. So they will continue to develop the design to integrate with the existing equipment and the constraints of the building. And then they're able to share those designs back to South East Water via their online portal, which is the platform known as BIM 360. And they're able to share that back to South East Water project management team and the project managers and our to work through that approval process and approve designs and add their recommendations, and they will continue publishing design updates online as those designs evolve. Then upon completion of the design, provide the models that they've developed and any associated metadata and asset data back to South East Water's AIS group, which is Asset Information System, for merging with the master model. So that was our that was our high level plan. GHD have provided us access to their online sharing platform. So this is BIM 360. So this is basically a collaborative environment where we can log in, you can review the models. There's all sorts of views they can produce. There's documents that they can share. Southeast Water staff can review these models and provide their approval or recommendations, or share whatever other information they need to do to progress the design process. This is an example of the building itself that we shared with GHD. So this grey building, and the red pipes that you can see there is the new equipment that they've designed for the aeration system. So that's just blower pipes going into the aerators. And then if you review these pipes or assets, you can retrieve the metadata. So the agreement was that they would share all that, or exchange that metadata back to Southeast Water, and we'll incorporate that into our master models and our asset management systems. So that kind of comes back to, I guess, what Brendan was saying before earlier about that ownership. So at this point, Southeast Water will own this model, but it's being maintained by GHD, be updated, and then provided back to us in a format that we can import into our own systems again. Here's an example of the point cloud survey that they did of the screenings room. So that's that blower building. So if I just go back to this one, you'll see the blower pipe coming out there. So that end of the building needed to be scanned, and they will process that point cloud, create the 3D digital assets, or the digital twins, which is the common term for it. And they will then continue on with their design work, and at the end of the project or at the end of the design project, they will forward that information back to us. It's an example of our master model. So this is back in Southeast Water, and this is the master model. So you'll probably notice there's some more equipment on this side of the building, which is the digesters. However, we only supplied the building part because that's all they were interested in. So we exported that as a submodel to GHD for them to initiate their work. And as you can see, they've done the point cloud, and they're working through that now. But with you can see the 3D mesh here, so we can actually also see there's parts of the model that are missing as well. So it's a good indicator of where we need to update models and where we need to do some work to get these up to scratch. But we're starting the journey, I guess. Excuse me. So what are some of the sharing and exchange agreements, and some of the shared realities and insights into how we think things will, I guess, function once a lot of these organisations start moving towards using 3D modelling and working with 3D models for assets. So the 3D model software and scanning technology is rapidly evolving. I mean, Southeast Water, we've had numerous discussions in-house regarding, is this something we want to be doing? Do we want to be purchasing scanning equipment, going and scanning all our assets and then generating 3D models from that? Or should we be outsourcing that? And leaning at the moment towards that sort of work being outsourced, and primarily because that software and the technology is evolving all the time. Who knows what it'll be like in 2 to 3 years' time. There's already talk now that some phones will be able to do point cloud scans, and they'll be to a reasonable accuracy. So it'll probably get cheaper, and we may end up doing some of that work internally for the smaller jobs. So the utilities and partners, we must allow things to evolve so that we can take advantage of new technologies and modelling techniques. So software will evolve, technologies will evolve. We shouldn't lock ourselves into a particular standard as such at this stage, because those models and data formats are evolving. We also realised that across the industry, consultants and designers will have different platforms and data management software. So GHC has, their AutoCAD platform, others are different, and we need to be able to work with any of those, I guess, partners you could call them, and be able to exchange our information with them and be able to share that amongst different platforms and be able to import that back and forth. Got to have the early upfront discussions on what your technologies are and your formats to facilitate that sharing and collaboration between the parties. So it's the exchange up front, then it's the ongoing collaboration, and then exchange back to Southeast Water again. It needs to be exchanged in open formats that can be easily shared and imported into each other's systems. So what we're doing today is we provide existing models to designers or our design partners. They add the upgraded works and return to Southeast Water for merging with the master. So Southeast Water is the owner. It's temporarily, I guess, exchanged with others. They add improvements and it comes back to us. So all those things need to be written into contracts and the actual information that we need, I guess, in terms of metadata. And because every job's different, you're never sure what metadata you'll need. So it's kind of open at this stage. And then going forward, Southeast Water will then export sub or complete master models to supported open formats for future upgrade projects and enhancements. So that was my case study. So thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. I haven't quite used up my 20 minutes. However, I'll happy to take some questions.
Well, I'm sure we could fill your time up, David, but
Shall I stop sharing?
yes. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in, but the one I'd like to start off with is the same one that we asked Brendan, and that's, what's your definition of successful data exchange?
Okay, so yeah, I think it's a success if you're able to successfully import that into your own systems and there's no data loss between the two. So you get a full data set that comes back, there's no information missing, and it's something that can be audited and validated and confirmed to be a correct representation of the world. And if you've got a correct representation of the world in your model, whether that's 2D or 3D, I think you've got a success. I mean, we've been working with the land development industry for many years now, and they provide digital data to us. So they build assets, do the as constructed survey work, do the drafting, provide that to us in a format that we can import into our own GIS systems, and that information gets validated and checked on the way through. And if it can be validated, checked and confirmed, and it passes all the tests, then it's posted in, and that becomes, I guess, the record, the source of truth, or the record that can be trusted.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Okay, so to go to our audience, next question: has Southeast Water provided any data to data.vic.gov?
No, I don't believe we have, not from the spatial side anyway. We haven't, I guess, ventured into that area. No, good question. I can't tell you why we haven't, but I don't think we've got any resistance to it. It just hasn't been on our radar, I guess.
Okay. Is it something that you can now take on board and maybe come back to us at a later time and
Yeah,
let us know
certainly.
how you're progressing with
Yeah,
that.
certainly have a look.
Yes.
We are aware of it, and I'm pretty sure some of the planners and those sorts download various planning layers and information from that location, but we've not pushed any data up there. I guess with our, I mean, we publish all our information online, so it's all there if you want to access it. So you can access it through, we've got an application called SUMAP, which runs on your mobile phone. So it'll run on your Android or your iPhone, so you can access it there. And that's just a free app that you can download. It's available online at southeastwater.com. There's the GIS, what we call asset map. So that's up there with all our GIS information. So it's all there, I guess, and we provide information to whomever requests it from us. So always getting that current information. I guess we probably think about the currency if it's provided to land or to vic.gov. Is it a web service feed? Is it WMS? Is it, or just a snapshot at a point in time? And if it's just a snapshot, it gets out of date pretty quick. So, and that's just off the top of my head, just doing a bit of thinking about it while I'm talking. But
sure,
I think that asset information is a pretty dynamic data set, and we're adding the equivalent of 15,000 new properties every year. So all the services that go to those parcels, it changes all the time. So if we're providing information, you need to ensure that it's you're getting the latest and the current. If you need to be digging holes, then you want to have all the full picture.
Yep, understand. Okay, moving on. Thank you for that, David. Moving on to our next question. This is a more contractual one. How were the contract requirements set out regarding the base models? That is the technical documents, or the general conditions, and also IP.
Yeah, good question. We're still evolving those requirements. Even internally, we're having discussions around how we write that into a contract and what's required. We can, and it's at the moment it's a pretty high level. It says, either follow the BIM standards, BIM level 2, for example, and you must provide us with a 3D model and relevant metadata. But as for a precise spec on attributes for particular assets, for example, so that gets a bit tricky because there's that many different manufacturers and different types of equipment and I'm focusing mainly on that treatment plant case study. There's all sorts of equipment that may be designed and built, and it's difficult to, I guess, prescribe what information you will need for that asset. I mean, pipes are pretty easy, size, material, length, those sorts of things. But when you get into some of those, heat extraction units, for example, they'll be sort of all sorts of attributes related to that I'm not aware of. But we rely on our consultants and designers to, I guess, provide us with the information that we would need to maintain that item or maintain that asset. So it's sort of a minimum maintainable attribution, I suppose, and the representation of it as well.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's evolving.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that if the person who asked that question wants a follow-up, they'll type it in. But I've got one more for you, David, before we ask Brendan to join us and then go to some more questions from the audience. You mentioned about BIM 360 and the provision of the information from your consultant that you then put into your master data sets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does Southeast Water link the 3D data directly to the asset management system so that you share the asset ID?
That's the plan. So at this stage, our models are basically CAD models that have been imported into a platform that we've built. There is very little in the way of attribution on the existing models, and that's just coming out of, if I just rewind a bit, we started receiving models in 3D around about 4 to 5 years ago, maybe 6. And that's because the industry is starting to design in 3D and they're able to provide as constructors to us in 3D as well. So we had these CAD models basically, so they're AutoCAD Civil 3D models parked in a bunch of folders on a server, with a home and not really being managed. So we felt with the way things were heading that this was an area that we needed to do some work on and start to at least bring all these models, and there was literally dozens and up to hundreds for each plant that needed to be brought together, basically assembled into one master model. So that's what we've done to date. We've assembled all those models into the master for each of our 7 treatment plants. Some of them are quite simple, they're just lagoon sites. Others are more complicated. However, we do need to go through a data capture project and identify each of those assets and relate them back to their record in the asset management systems. So we do need to implement that, and we do need to tag our assets with those unique identifiers so that we can do those joins back to asset management systems and even SCADA and things like that. So you sort of start to see down the track where you can link these, I guess, 3D objects into other external systems such as SCADA and the works management and asset management systems.
Okay.
So it was a good question, yes, but no, we haven't done that as yet.
Okay. It's on the cards. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Brendan, could I get you to pop your camera back on, please, and join us for the panel session. So there's a couple more questions that have been posted, which I wanted to pose to both of you. So here's the first one. Is it fair to say that with a little more time, thought and effort spent up front considering data sharing, that it more than pays for itself for asset related projects?
Yes, totally. What I haven't spoken today, but that's really changed the way we've done our condition audits to actually do the spec and provide the templates of how we want the data, not just, we want you to capture these, but we actually give them a spreadsheet to say, this is pretty much your attribute set and how we want it. And that allows us to much easily then import their findings, whether it's asset quantities or condition or inspection details and findings. Previously, we're a bit light on in our specs. So everything we got back each time was all different. So we'd have to say, okay, yeah, that bit probably goes to that field and those 2 bits can equal that value. So yeah, putting in time up front, asking what you want has saved us a lot of money at the end of the project, a lot of time at the end of the project, importing it.
Great. Thanks. David, your perspective?
Yes, no, completely agree. Spend the time up front, define your requirements, define the information that you require, talk about the formats, talk about what can be provided, and talk about what can be exchanged, I guess, going both ways to make everyone's life a bit easier and smoother. You know, we've been collecting as constructed information from builders for many years now, and you know, sometimes it's our own internal people that, you know, fail to, you know, they go and build a new pump station and the last thing you get is the drawings. So everyone's probably experienced that one. So, and that drawing is just a dumb PDF. So, you know, you don't really have a model or digital representation. It's just a PDF drawing, and that ends up in the plan room. But then we have to actually digitize that and get that into the GIS somehow. But yes, definitely need to be having those conversations up front and having your requirements defined so that you can easily import that as it turns up.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that both of your organisations have evolved from just a straight, here's a handover of the asset, to here's a handover of the asset and the asset data, so that they can then be managed and mitigate the risk and liabilities.
Yeah, indeed. Brendan, I'll talk to that one here.
It's more so the case for our delivered projects. There are still cases where the buildings team will go ahead and get a asbestos audit done and then just plonk that on our desk and go, here you go. And then we have to go back and match up all these IDs because they didn't come to us first to say, how would you like the data? Or do you have a list, our building register with all the asset IDs? Yeah, so there's a bit of work for us to still do in there. But for assets and the infrastructure side of things, yeah, it's a bit more discussion happening first.
Okay, great. Thank you. This next question is for you, David. Is there a plan to accurately survey horizontally and vertically all Southeast water assets?
So the network assets, so a lot of that information is provided, like, so the new data that comes to us from the land development industry, and that's all to survey quality. So it's all to a pretty high accuracy. Some of the older areas was probably digitized off the 1 to 2,500 plans, and that's all tied into mostly land parcels, so offsets, for example. We don't intend to, I mean, we're talking, you know, 28,000 kilometres of pipeline in the network, so we're not planning to go out and survey the exact location of all the manholes, for example, or the valve locations or hydrant locations. We will, that's for the network data. For the, I guess, the vertical assets or things like treatment plants and pump stations, as you probably saw in my presentation, we are starting to, well, assemble all those models into the master model, and we've done drone scans of the terrain. That's highlighted some gaps about where we need to, I guess, capture some further information and model. So we're, I guess, trying to prioritize how we might go about that. So that's most likely, do we outsource it and have those assets scanned, have them modeled up and sent back to us? That's probably the quickest way. Or do we have a team, or do we ask our surveyors to start doing some of that work? And we've only got 2 surveyors, so it's probably not likely that will go that way. So the decisions haven't really been made around the treatment plant facilities, but certainly there'll be a need to scan and model up and survey those assets.
Yeah, well, I'm sure all the surveyors and consultants listening in on this would be very keen on that response, David.
Yes,
Probably come and talk to you about their services, which I think that's one of the intentions of having these kind of sessions, is to see where there's opportunities to collaborate, and particularly for CEBA GITA members, to see where they can provide their services.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely, and I agree. Will, you might have seen that model that I've shown. You can see there's the aeration there. They need to be scanned or surveyed, one or the other, modelled up and merged with our master. So there's certainly, and that's not only that, it's the then capturing the metadata about those and adding asset identifiers and linking that up with our other systems as well. So
yep,
there's that work to be done.
Understand. Thank you.
David, sorry, could I ask David a follow-on question?
Sure, why not?
Around the model you've got, how does the projection impact that? And are you or have you moved to GDA 2020? And what might that mean for your data sets?
Okay, so the model that we were looking at there, that Mount Martha one, so all our models, in fact, are on GDA 94. We will do a shift on those once we shift to GDA 2020. To answer the GDA 2020 question, we have just kicked off a project to move to GDA 2020. Land Victoria won't be supplying us with GDA 94 land parcels beyond February next year. So we need to shift all our asset data to GDA 2020 and also move to align with the land base. And we have to make some changes to our import processes to support both GDA 94 and GDA 2020. So there's some shift of our data and some changes to our processes to support both, because we won't be 100% sure if all people that all partners that supply us with data will be moving. They'll probably move with us as well. Some of them probably already on 2020. So I don't think moving or capturing your information on 2020 will be a big deal for those that need to be doing it. It's just a matter of us. So we've actually got to pick up all our assets and shift it, and then compare it with the land base and make sure everything's aligning. So there'll be a lot of that'll all be done. We'll just intend to use FME to do that, do the reprojection. We've got to shift all the geometries and all the components.
Yeah.
So that's kicking off, and we're aiming to get that done by the first week of December, so that we can lots of people go on leave over January. So we want to get it all done before Christmas is the plan.
And let's hope we can get away when we have our leave this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Great question, Brendan. Okay, so next question from our audience. This is to both of you. Have your respective organisations sought to develop overarching digital strategies in view of the shifting perspectives on data or other objectives such as sustainability and resilience?
Did you want to go first, Brendan? Or
probably. I don't think we have. So when I mentioned that IT strategy, I haven't actually seen the spec or its scope. I don't think it includes data. Just more the resourcing and infrastructure, that side of things. So no, we haven't considered a data strategy. And I'm not quite sure what was the resilience part of that.
So yes, I'm going to repeat that for you. And so there's two aspects to it. One is an overarching digital strategy in the context of such issues as sustainability and resilience.
I don't think we do, but I'd say our business continuity planning would cover what we need to continue, access to data and systems and that sort of thing. I think it would be a bit more disparate with different strategies and their reliance on data rather than a single overarching strategy.
Okay. Thanks, Brendan. David?
Yeah, so Southeast Water, yes, we have corporate strategies that handle business continuity and resilience and sustainability and takes into account, you know, the changing landscape, changing environments, climate change, for example, government mandates, all sorts of things that South East Water needs to respond to. We of course recognise, yes, the world is changing in the digital space as well. So we have there is a digital utility strategy, which is mostly focused on digital metering, but it does go a bit broader. We've also recognised digital engineering as a theme, and something that we need to also respond to and be able to support. I mean, largely we are an engineering company that does build a lot of we've got lots of customers as well, but we do build and maintain lots of assets. So that's an important part of the strategy as well. There's asset information strategies and asset management strategies as well. So all those things take into account management of our assets in what is I guess a changing world. Particularly, there's also a project on the way called Climate Adapt, which is how South East Water needs to adapt to some of those things that might impact South East Water, such as extended droughts and higher rainfall, perhaps more frequent higher rainstorms, and the potential for rising sea level. And they're talking, you know, the 2030, 2050, 2090 sort of timeframes. What does it mean for South East Water? And what does that mean for our assets? And how we can continue to provide fresh, clean drinking water and take away sewer at the end of the day, I guess. So yes, there's numerous strategies.
Okay, thanks very much. That was quite a comprehensive answer. I appreciate that. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes for some more questions whilst our audience is thinking of some more, and don't worry if they don't have any, I've got plenty. Fran, could you put up the next Zoom poll question, please? Okay, so how much importance do you place on data sharing and data exchange? Interesting mix. So far we've got answers in all areas, low, medium and high. I'm going to assume for you, David and Brendan, that it's of high importance because of the impact of not knowing where your assets are or other people's assets are.
Correct, yes.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who's contributed to that. If anybody else has any more questions, please don't hesitate to put it into the Q&A or pop it into the chat area. Look, just one final question from me, and at the risk of running into Jacinta's time, but what kind of cost is there of not being able, or let me rephrase that, has there been a particular instance that has had a direct impact on your organisations because you didn't know that assets were there, whether yours or other authorities' assets?
Yeah, I can start that one. So we often experience asset strikes. So often directional drilling under the ground can often strike our sewer mains, for example. There's dial before you dig. There's all manner of, put all sorts of effort into accuracy of information and make it available, and it's available for dial before you dig, but accidents still happen and people still, excavate in areas and strike assets that need to be then repaired. So that comes at a cost. So we have to rectify that. Oftentimes we're not made aware of it. It gets struck, builders move on, do other things, or they don't even know they've done it. They could be excavating for a new building site, for example, and hit one of our assets and they don't even know they've done it. And then we get some blockages and some issues later and need to go and camera it and put the camera down and find what's happened. So there has been examples at treatment facilities where electrical cables have been struck. Luckily, it didn't lead to any serious injury, but there's certainly a massive risk for, particularly around some of those sites, in striking live cables. So that's something that's been recognised as a big safety issue, and it's also sort of driving that need to make sure we know where all the underground assets are at those treatment facilities for that, to protect our people.
Okay, thank you for that. Brendan, have you had a particular instance?
Similar sort of situations. Not that we didn't know where the assets were, but maybe the accuracy of their location. So one example was a water main that was like from the dial before you dig, way away from the site where we were installing a playground. When they come to put the footings in of the playground, they actually hit that pipe. It was outside of whatever buffer surveyors use to say it's not even worth doing service location in here because it's, tens of meters over there. Hit it, respond to, wanted water. I think it was Brenton personally come out on site and GPS'd it and updated their data set for next time. So yeah, that sort of just put a bit of a pause. Luckily there was no asset damage or anything, but just put a delay on that project. We had to landscape or configure that playground. And a similar situation, we have a lot of footpaths with services without the required cover on them. So it could be Telstra or gas sitting much shallower below footpaths. So when we come to replace those, we often expose those a lot. Yeah, knowing accurate depths and locations would really make it a safer work environment.
Yes, so we've still got some legacy issues that we just need to work through. I remember someone passing on a story to me that, yes, if you strike into a water main, you get a bit wet. Strike into a gas main, it goes boom. So, yes, things for us to deal with in the future. But in any case, look, thank you both for your presentations and your contribution to answering the questions. It's much appreciated. Thank you to our audience for asking the questions, and also for responding to the polls. Jacinta, it's back to you.
Thank you, George. Thanks to everyone who's logged in this morning and joined us in our second webinar. A very special thanks to our captain, George, and to our speakers, Brendan and to David. We thank you both for giving up your time and passing on some of your knowledge to us all this morning. So, as we mentioned earlier, this was webinar 2 of our 4 series. So keep an eye out for information about webinar 3, which is set for November the 11th, and we'll have the title of VDAS and the challenges to an asset-led recovery. So our website and your inboxes will provide you with some more details of how to register for that event. So everyone enjoy your Thursday, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinta. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, George.
Bye.